So, continuing to answer your questions here in 2019, this is for Jeffrey Marquis Music. Now, he asked, could you showcase the writing of an 80s instrumental pop song? And I thought, okay, yep. So, I haven't prepared anything at all. So I'm going to show you the steps that I would go to making something perhaps in the vein of that Axel F tune from Beverly Hills Cop. And the sounds and the techniques and all of those things that I would use. Also things like the soundtrack from Fletch, for example. So no vocals. I'm going to instead use some synth sounds and the drum sounds and show you a bit about the programming and the various things that you can tweak inside the synthesizers. It's very, very powerful, this GarageBand, for this. So I'm going to start off with, I'm going to start a new song and pick some drums. I'm going to go more sounds and this time go to electronic drum sounds. Now, those of you with iOS 12 will have access to some more specific 80s drum machines. I haven't got that. I've got iOS 11 here. You can see my video about upgrading. I'm basically petrified of upgrading anything on this for fear of it running very slowly. I've learnt the hard way with another iPad. So I'm going to try, I don't know, classic drum machine. You know, it's fairly generic words there. So I'm going to pick slightly slower tempo perhaps. Let's see what happens with that. Now tempos wise, you know, if you think of the disco era, that's 120. Think of sort of house that's a bit faster than that. I'll tell you what, let's raise it up a bit, just you know, 110 is the default. And I'm also going to pick a key, a random F minor. You can see the iPad display next to me here. I've got the iPad in front of me and I've got nothing else. There's no keyboards attached, there's nothing. It's just the little headphone output which is feeding the recording that you're listening to this on. So I'm going to record a drum part and I can tweak it afterwards. Okay, so I've got an 8-bar loop there. Now, the first thing you record when it's drums, it quantizes automatically. You don't have to make it do, well, rather you can undo it if you really want, but actually I didn't play it very well at all. So 16th note, straight notes. That's much better. It's put it in the right place for me. So I'm going to cut this at bar 9. Now I set the recording length to automatic, which means that I can play for as long as I want before it stops. You could set that at the start just so that it doesn't sort of impede your creativity. You can actually just worry about what you're playing. So I'm going to get rid of the bar 9, as it were, there. And this time I'm going to set the section A at 8 bars. There we go. So now I've got my 8-bar loop. I'm going to make, I'm going to get a bass sound now. So electric bass or bass synth. If we go to notes, but this time I'm going to change from a bass guitar to something else. What we got there, outright bass. Let's try retro bass. Now the two controls we got at the top are the main two controls of filter controls that you get on lots of synthesizers, Cutoff and Resonance. Now Cutoff decides how much of that top end, the top frequencies there's going to be. And the resonance control, it looks at the point at which you cut that frequency off and accentuates the sort of cutoff frequency. So I'm going to put a line over those drums now. Okay, let's have a little listen to that. Now, the quantization of that bass sound is not set by default, but I'm going to set it to 16th note just with the drums there. Now I'm getting a little bit of a conflict between the bass drum sound and the bass sound. If you listen to that kick sound, now there's two things we can do here. We can change the drum sound perhaps. If I just pick something else. Perhaps not. I'm going to go with that. Now, those of you without the iOS 12 sounds, you could look at something like Funkbox, which is by Synthetic Bits, and that allows you to record inter-app audio as well. So you can do your programming within that, within the app, and then bring it in. Just as an aside, I'm just going to show you that. Where is it? Here we go. Funkbox. There we go. It's a vintage drum machine app. That starts playing when you open it up. But you have all sorts of things like the Lin drum, which is the classic sort of early 80s. Yeah, this was a brave new world. Anyway, you can pick up your kits. You can actually do a pattern edit where you can edit the actual patterns like this. I mean, it's quite a lot there at the moment. I mean, if I take take some of that away. And then there are the other steps of that are shown there, which is why it sounded bare at the beginning and not at the end. Have a look at my demo on my channel of that particular app, because it is very good. So going back to GarageBand. So making silly faces for no real reason at all. I'm going to add a synth sound now. So I'm going to go to keyboard. I need some sort of form of some chords. So if I go to more sounds, now we have the Alchemy synth here, which is incredibly good, but perhaps for that 80s simplicity, because although it was a brave new world, the synths at the time were quite simple compared with what you can get now. So maybe synth classics would be perhaps a better bet here. Let's have a look. Quantum keys. Don't know. I tell you what, I'm going to put those chords down. Now, I did specify a key, which means that which means that I could have my I'm going to do that. So I'm going to record that again because I was kind of just jabbing randomly. I quite like the I quite like that sort of repeating rhythm. So it's not just a higgledy-piggledy collection of nonsense. So it's just something slightly different the second time. Notice that I did change the chords. The bass is in F all the way through. It's just that F minor, bum, F, the F. But if you have an E flat major chord over your F, you get an F7 sus chord, which is quite nice. And you can actually do that on here as well. So you could keep the same bass and change the chords. In fact, I quite like that D flat chord. Perhaps I can do that later. So moving back to the main working space, I'm just going to quantize that as well. Quantization really was a sort of a 1980s thing when we had computers and sequencers. Suddenly everything could be absolutely nailed to the beat. I'm just going to take that down in level a bit because it's quite present with that bass and drums at the moment, because I'm going to add some other things. I'm also having to remember what I'm doing here in terms of the chords, because I want maybe something now which has got a longer sound. Let's have a look. Maybe I could have something where the cutoff is a little bit just brought down a bit, so that we've got a nice backdrop here. Let's try something like that. With a little at the end, little fill. Just quantize that up. Straight 16th. In fact, it doesn't need to be 16th. It could be a quarter note. No. At the end it went ba ba. So that was my shortest note. So I have to keep that. Now it didn't play the first chord, but it did that time. Perhaps I wasn't quite at the beginning. Now, also in the 1980s, there were the introduction of digital delays or echo units, which you could set to a particular number of milliseconds for the delays, which meant that you could actually use digital delay lines with some precision. So perhaps I'm going to go to, let's have a look, synth leads now. Let's have a supergroup lead. That sounds good to me. Now that's possibly a little bit 70s. Now you can hear there that there is a digital delay at the moment, and on modern equipment like this or any digital audio workstation, you can set the delay in terms of quavers, crotchets, or 16ths or 8ths or quarter notes. Back in the day, and I remember working at EMI at Townhouse in the 90s, on the end of each mixing desk was a conversion chart. So for 120 beats per minute, for example, a quaver or an 8th note would have been a quarter of a second or 250 milliseconds. So you have this big chart, like a reference chart. You'd set your old delay units to do that. So I could do a similar sort of thing here by going into my settings, and then instead of echo, going into plugins and EQ, adding a delay. Where are we? Track echo. And then it gives you a bit more control over it, like the repeat time, the colour, whether it gets more trebly. If I just do that. So the repeats are basically a slightly different tonal variation. doesn't matter. I mean, the thing is, when you're trying to simulate 1980s synths, you can only go so far, really. I mean, if you really want to simulate the bass sound of Don't You Want Me Baby by the Human League, you go out and buy the actual synthesizer that they used, but be prepared to spend thousands of pounds or dollars on that. Because, you know, all these old synths, they are getting rare now. Why not use something like this, which is, again, a brave new world? You can do all sorts of things with this that you couldn't do with the original synths. Always keep that in mind. So let's try an eighth note, just 1/8. Now you can set the repeat rate as well. If I get the repeat so it's actually not very much at all, and it's actually also too loud, the wet control sets the level of the echo itself. So I've got to think of a line now, and actually this sound at the moment is not quite what I'm looking for in terms of its, in terms of the sort of the length of the notes. Let's, there we go. The decay time I've set to maximum now, which means that it'll just keep going. The filter decay, what that means at the moment, you can hear an attack at the beginning. But if I put this bit further up, you basically get a slightly different sort of timbre with your top end frequencies. And with the cutoff, I could also. Let's go with it for the moment. You can be there for hours searching for the right sound, not really find anything, and then very, very quickly lose control or lose the direction of what you're trying to achieve. Okay, I'm back in the zone. So I'm going to try recording something. Now, at the same time, we have this control in the middle, glissando, scroll, or pitch. Now, the pitch control is quite cool because you get a continuously variable pitch that is unencumbered by the 12-note system. Don't know, might not work. The scroll control allows you to go along the keyboard a little bit more fine-tuned than the octave control which you have here, +2. See what that sounds like. Don't know. Might work, might not. At the moment, that sound is quite high in the mix. Ideally, I want those drums and the bass to be punchy, but then the mix here, I want to have maybe a little bit of compression on that, but then take the track volume down. Everything's sounding a little bit too modern, perhaps, at the moment. Now, in the 1980s, when things were recorded, if we go back to the sort of early 1980s, lots of it was recorded on analog tape, which gave it a bit of an edge. It gave it rather a unique sound, actually. It was the brave new world of digital synths mixed with the old world of analog recording tape. So it had quite a warm, fuzzy sound, whereas this is very present, very modern. Now, we could simulate, maybe. We could try that. If I take the If I add, going back, if I add an effects track, now, although I'm not going to record the effects using this is the way of getting a master track. Okay, so now I've done that effects track. You can see it in purple there, pink, purple. I'm going to delete that. Notice that the effects track is still present. When this allows you to get a few other things like a master equalizer and other things. So I'm going to try taking down the mid-range a little bit to make it sound, so give it that classic 80s loudness feel. Okay, now, so far then, we've got a drums, bass, a couple of synths and a lead line. Really, there's not a huge amount else that I can put on this that's going to augment what I've got there. So, I've done section A, which is my 8 bars. Now, when you're writing something like this, you can start adding sections. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this section. So what that's done is essentially give me another section, and at the moment I'm looking at bars 9 to 16. So I can actually view all the sections if I want. There we go. So I could do something like, well, for example, taking that away. I could take perhaps, let's see what happens if I delete that. And as I go back to the beginning, I've got myself a nice intro and then into my theme. So it's a very good way of sort of playing jigsaw puzzle with your tune to make it, to start building up what you're going to do. Now, this is really how it all began in the sort of mid-1980s, or later on in the 80s, with things like the Atari ST computer and other sort of computer sequencers that will allow you just to put stuff together literally that quickly by making an intro that was, you know, the same drums. Perhaps you could even go into this one. I could, for example, take the hi-hats away by just drawing a box around them. So that's given me a natural build-up to where that theme is going to come in at bar 9. Now, at the moment, I'm just on one key, but is there any need to go elsewhere? Perhaps there is, perhaps there isn't. It depends on what you're doing. So I'm going to, I think I'm going to add another section. And this time, I'm going to I'm going to go visit all the sections because I'm going to copy that now, and then I'm going to paste it at bar 17. Now, I'm going to also copy the bass and paste it at bar 17, but I'm going to change the key. I'm going to change the chord that I'm basically playing the bass over. So if I go to edit now, and then select all. Now, you've got to be a bit careful here because when you go into the edit window, it actually does show you all of the sections. So if I go select all, it's going to select the entire tune. I don't want that, so instead I'm going to draw a box around it. Now, the best way to draw a box is if you try and draw it. Try and draw it as close to the bar line as you can. And also, if you've forgotten a note, you can just hold one of them, bit like pressing shift on the keyboard, on a computer keyboard, and you can select them all then. So I'm going to go up to B flat. So and then put in, let's see what this sounded like here. You can go in and solo this. Okay, so I'm going to play something a bit different here now. So. Okay, so I did sort of randomly jab at those chords, but it's something that I could, something I could use. I could try maybe with the other synthesizer. Maybe stay on that one chord. Okay, that is not working. Those chords in the other synth were a little bit too exploratory. So this is where you kind of come to this crossroads where you're thinking, okay, what am I doing? Am I gonna get rid of that? The answer for me is going to be yes, because I want that to be a bit simpler. So let's have another look at the I'm just going to go between those two chords. And then I just changed it slightly at the end. And then I've got to make sure that that's going to work with returning perhaps to the original section. So going back to my rich oscillator synth, I'm just going to have a little play with that and see. You have different inversions of chords. So this B flat minor chord, that's actually a second inversion chord. There's an F, a B flat and a D flat. There's the first inversion, and there's your root position. I'm going to stick with that one. Notice the cutoff control there. If I go back and play, it stored the cutoff frequency change. Now this is very important because those synths were controllable in real time originally. Why should they not be here? So although of course you don't have fine control over lots of things, we're dealing with a package here that costs £0.0, assuming of course you have the tablet to start with. So pretty powerful. Now the staccato lead, I'm going to just recap what I did the first time round. Now I wonder whether I might not be able to use that same tune over the different chord that I had, because then it's maintaining some sort of continuity but with extra interest. I didn't hear much wrong with that. Okay, perhaps it could be a different sound though. What about that? So if I add another track, I'm going to get super sync lead, simple lead perhaps. Now some of these sounds are quite 70s. They're quite pure and they're quite basic in their sound. Now, the other sounds that you get, we looked at cutoff and resonance just now, but we also have attack, decay, sustain, and release, which is how you would shape a sound. So the attack, like here, if I play the note, it'll take a while before that note sounds. And then release is exactly the opposite. When you release the note off the keyboard, it'll keep going. And sometimes the release time can be almost infinite. So if I go back to here now, I've got my synth sound. I can just drag that part down to here to see if that works. Now, we've got the same line as we had before, but the synth sound has changed. Now, I think we need to take it up 1 octave there. So I'll find my notes. There we go. Select all. No, I'm not going to. Yes, I am going to select all because this is the first time that this has appeared. Remember last time where I was saying if you select all, you select the entire tune. Luckily not here. Not far off the same sound, but there's a subtle difference there, which I'm okay with, because the thing is, if you make it too different, it could be it's just a collection of things just thrown together in this sort of slightly haphazard fashion. But at the moment, I'm kind of happy with how things are going. So maybe I'd want to take section B and duplicate that. Now, what that does is it will put it after section C. So I've now got section D. So that means it's going to go back to the original part. If I go back to look at all the sections, there we go. I've now got 4 things, the fourth being a repeat of the second. So I've got something that's starting to accrue some sort of length of time here. We've got, 110 beats per minute, 32 odd bars, 32 times 420 divided by 110, that's a minute. It's about a bit over a minute's worth at the moment. Maybe we're looking for a 3 or 4 minute tune. Don't know, we could have a section C, something slightly different. Now, we could also take the snare drum away from the beginning. Now what I've done is I've got rid of all the snare drums apart from the very last, the last one actually. There we go. So. Okay, so I think we're getting somewhere with this. The point of all this is to, not to fall into the trap of thinking I want my tune to sound like this. Of course, there's a genre. If you say, I'm going to record a bit of funk music or a bit of jazz or a bit of soul or a bit of heavy metal or a bit of, classic rock. Of course, there are going to be parameters that you would work with. But the point of all this is that, this is as brave new world as it was when the original synths came out. So I hope that answers some sort of question on this subject. So there we go. There it is. I could put that underneath some sort of, 80s film as a bit of incidental music perhaps. There we go.